Clara Dawson's world shattered when outlaws murdered her husband and forced her into the notorious Crimson Feather brothel. Each day brought new horrors until a mysterious stranger arrived, not as another client, but as her unexpected salvation. Former Texas Ranger Ethan Stone offered escape instead of exploitation, but Clara's path to freedom would demand courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Before we start the video, comment where you are tuning in from. Clara Dawson hummed softly as she kneaded bread dough on the worn wooden table. Afternoon light streamed through the cabin window, catching dust motes in golden beams. The Montana Territory spring had finally arrived, melting away the harsh winter that had tested their small homestead. 3 years of marriage to Thomas had taught her the rhythms of frontier life, difficult but rewarding in its simplicity. "I should be back before sundown," Thomas had said that morning, tucking his father's gold pocket watch into his vest before riding to town for supplies. The timepiece was their only real valuable, ornately engraved with scrollwork that caught the light when opened. Thomas rarely carried it, preferring to keep it safely tucked away, but today he'd wanted to show the jeweler about a loose hinge. Clara placed the dough in a bowl and covered it with a cloth. The sound of approaching horses made her glance toward the window. Too early for Thomas to return, 3 riders approached fast strangers. Something in their purposeful approach sent a chill through her bones. She barely had time to wipe her flour-covered hands before the door burst open. A tall man with a face weathered like old leather stepped inside, flanked by 2 others. His eyes, cold as river stones, surveyed the cabin. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, removing his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Name's Silas Webb, your husband around." "He's in town," Clara answered, backing toward the kitchen knife block. "What business do you have with Thomas?" Webb smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Search the place," he ordered his men. Ignoring her question, the men tore through their home, upending furniture, slashing the thin mattress, emptying drawers onto the floor. Clara stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs as they destroyed everything she and Thomas had built. "It's not here, Silas," one of the men finally declared. Webb's expression darkened. "Check again," Daniel said. Dawson took it. The sound of an approaching horse silenced everyone. Clara's heart sank when she recognized Thomas's whistle. Before she could scream a warning, Webb grabbed her, pressing a calloused hand over her mouth. Thomas entered, arms full of parcels. They dropped to the floor as he took in the scene, his ransacked home, his terrified wife. "Webb," he said, voice steady despite the fear in his eyes, "I don't have what you're looking for." "You were at the saloon last night," Webb said. "Heard every word of our plans for the Helena Bank. Can't have witnesses, Dawson." "I didn't hear anything," Thomas insisted, eyes darting to Clara. "Let my wife go, she knows nothing." "Can't take that chance," Webb drawled. He nodded to one of his men. The gunshot echoed through the small cabin. Thomas crumpled to the floor, crimson blooming across his chest. Clara screamed against Webb's hand, struggling violently as her husband's eyes found hers one last time before the light faded from them. Webb released her and she collapsed beside Thomas, cradling his head as sobs racked her body. One of the men rifled through Thomas's pockets, extracting the gold watch. "Well, looky here," he said, tossing it to Webb. Webb examined it briefly before pocketing it. "Not what we came for, but might be useful." He studied Clara with calculated coldness. "What do we do with her, boss?" "Kill her," the third man suggested. "No witnesses, like you said." Webb stroked his beard, contemplating. "Nah. Got a better idea. Madame Rosalie over in Copper Creek owes me a favor. She's always looking for fresh girls." Clara's blood turned to ice water. Madame Rosalie's Crimson Feather was infamous throughout the territory. "No," she whispered, backing away. "Please no." Her plea was met with laughter as they bound her wrists and dragged her from the cabin. The last glimpse of her home was through tear-blurred eyes, Thomas's body growing smaller as they rode away. The journey to Copper Creek passed in a haze of grief and terror. They traveled mostly at night, keeping Clara bound and gagged. By the time they reached the mining town, her spirit was nearly broken. Copper Creek thrived on 2 industries, gold and flesh. The Crimson Feather stood apart from the other saloons and brothels, a 3-story building painted deep red with black trim, lanterns illuminating its balconies where women in bright dresses called to passing men. Madame Rosalie met them in her private parlor, eyeing Clara like a farmer assessing livestock. A tall woman with henna'd hair piled high, she wore a silk gown and enough jewelry to finance a small war. "Undamaged goods, I trust?" she asked Webb, circling Clara. "Just widowed," Webb replied with a smirk. "Hasn't been touched otherwise." Rosalie lifted Clara's chin with a jeweled hand. Pretty enough needs fattening up, but the miners like them delicate. She reached for her purse. Usual price, Clara found her voice then, raw from days of silence. I won't do this, I'd rather die. Rosalie smiled indulgently. They all say that, darling, yet here they stay. Money changed hands and Clara changed hands with it. Webb departed with a mock tip of his hat, leaving Clara to Madame Rosalie's tender mercies. The following days blurred together. Locked in a small upstairs room, Clara was bathed, dressed in revealing clothes, and instructed in her duties. Each time she refused or fought, punishments grew harsher. When she attempted escape through a window, they beat her until she couldn't stand, then locked her in a closet for 2 days without food. Try again, Rosalie had whispered when releasing her, and I'll send you to the broken wheel at the edge of town. The men there don't care if the girls are conscious. After 2 weeks, Clara's defiance had calcified into numb resignation. She moved through each degrading day mechanically, retreating deep within herself where memories of Thomas and their simple life sustained her. It was during this time that Ethan Stone arrived at the Crimson Feather. Tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair graying at the temples, he carried himself with the quiet readiness of a predator. When he requested the new girl, Clara prepared herself for another night of survival, but when they were alone, Ethan didn't touch her. Instead, he pulled a chair to the corner of the room. "You're Clara Dawson," he said, not a question. She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "I've been tracking Sela's web for 2 years," he explained. "He killed my partner. When I heard about a widow sold to Rosalie's place, I knew it was connected." "You a lawman?" Clara asked warily. "Used to be Texas Ranger." He leaned forward. "I need information about Webb, anything you can tell me." Clara studied him, searching for deceit. Finding none, she slowly recounted the day Webb murdered Thomas, including the mention of bank plans in Helena. Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking questions. When she finished, he stood. "I'll come back for you," he said quietly. "Get you out of here." Clara laughed bitterly. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Ranger." "Stone," he corrected. "Ethan Stone, and I don't." With that, he left. Clara watched him go, refusing to nurture the tiny seed of hope his words had planted. Hope was dangerous here. Hope would break what little remained of her. A week passed with no sign of Ethan Stone. Clara told herself she'd imagined his promise, that she'd been a fool to believe even for a moment that salvation was possible. Yet each night, she found herself glancing at the door, searching for his face among the men who came to the Crimson Feather. The night Clara had given up hope, chaos erupted in Copper Creek. A fire broke out at the livery stable, spreading quickly to adjacent buildings. The Crimson Feather emptied as patrons and workers rushed to form bucket brigades. Clara stood at her window, watching flames illuminate the night sky when a shadow moved on the balcony outside. Ethan Stone appeared like an apparition, silently sliding her window open. "Time to go," he whispered. Clara hesitated. This could be another trap, another cruelty in an endless series. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Ethan replied bluntly. "But staying means certain death for your spirit. I'm offering a chance." A gunshot rang out below. One of Madame Rosalie's enforcers had spotted them. Clara made her decision in an instant, grabbing the small bundle of possessions she'd hidden beneath a floorboard. She climbed through the window onto the balcony where Ethan waited. They descended via rope to the alley below where 2 horses stood ready. Clara struggled to mount, her body weak from weeks of poor treatment. Ethan boosted her up, then swung into his own saddle as shouts rose behind them. "Ride north," he ordered, spurring his horse forward. They galloped through town, dodging panicked townspeople fighting the fire. 3 of Rosalie's men gave chase, gaining ground as they reached open country. Clara hunched low over her horse's neck, pushing the animal harder than her limited riding experience should allow, fear lending her skill. When they reached the river, Ethan veered east along its bank. The spring melt had turned the water into a roaring torrent. Clara followed, trusting his judgment even as her pursuers' shots whistled past. "We need to cross," Ethan shouted over the water's roar. "Can you swim?" "Not well," Clara admitted. "Stay on your horse. He knows what to do." Ethan plunged into the churning water. Clara's horse followed without hesitation. The shocking cold stole her breath as water surged around them. Her horse struggled against the current, swimming valiantly. For one terrifying moment, they went under. Clara emerged gasping, clinging desperately to the saddle as the horse found its footing on the far bank. Their pursuers reached the riverside but hesitated at the dangerous crossing. After firing a few futile shots, they turned back toward town. Clara slid from her horse, legs giving way beneath her. Ethan dismounted more gracefully, quickly helping her to her feet. "We need to keep moving," he said, voice gentler than before. "Can you ride a little longer?" She nodded, though every muscle screamed in protest. They continued through the night, Clara fighting exhaustion with each passing mile. When dawn broke, they sheltered in a small stand of pines while Ethan scouted the area. "No sign of pursuit," he reported upon returning, "but we're not safe yet." Clara huddled near the small fire he'd built. "Why are you doing this?" The truth. Ethan studied her for a long moment before answering. "Webb killed my partner 2 years ago, been tracking him since. When I heard about what happened to your husband, I knew it was connected." "You're using me as bait," Clara concluded flatly. "No. But you might know things that could help me find him. And when you do, what happens to me then?" Ethan's expression softened slightly. "I'll take you wherever you want to go, you have my word." Clara laughed bitterly. The word of a stranger means little these days. Instead of arguing, Ethan pulled out jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag, offering her a portion. They ate in silence as morning light filtered through the trees. "Get some rest," he suggested afterward. "I'll keep watch." Clara intended only to close her eyes briefly, but exhaustion claimed her immediately. When she woke, the sun was high overhead. Ethan sat nearby, cleaning his revolver with practiced efficiency. "You've been hunting Webb for 2 years?" she asked, sitting up stiffly. Ethan nodded without looking up. "Almost had him 6 months ago in Deadwood. He slipped away." "What did he do to your partner?" "Shot him in the back during a bank robbery we were trying to stop." Ethan reassembled his gun with quick, precise movements. Jenkins had a wife and 2 young daughters. That night they sheltered in an abandoned trapper's cabin Ethan knew of. The one-room structure offered better protection than open country. Clara sat near the fire while Ethan prepared a meager supper. "Why did Webb kill Thomas?" she asked suddenly. "He mentioned bank plans in Helena." Ethan stopped stirring the pot of beans. "Your husband wasn't just a homesteader, was he?" "What do you mean?" "Thomas Dawson. Former Army scout, good with a rifle, known to work occasionally with the territorial marshal." Clara stared at him. "That's impossible. Thomas never mentioned any of that." "He was an informant," Ethan said gently. "Had been feeding information about Webb's gang to the authorities for months." The revelation struck Clara like a physical blow. "No, I knew everything about him. Men like your husband keep secrets to protect those they love." That night, Clara lay awake on her bedroll, re-examining every memory of Thomas through this new lens. Had there been signs she'd missed, unexplained absences she'd accepted without question? The Thomas she'd known seemed incompatible with Ethan's claims, yet the facts were undeniable. Before dawn, Ethan woke her. "We need to move. 3 hours to a settlement where I have friends." During the ride, Clara observed Ethan more carefully. His weathered face revealed little, but she noted how he constantly scanned their surroundings, how his hand never strayed far from his weapon. He was a man accustomed to danger, to being hunted. By midday, they reached a small collection of cabins nestled in a valley. An older man with a silver beard greeted them. "Ethan Stone," he said warmly. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Jackson," Ethan nodded. "Need shelter for a few days." Jackson's eyes moved to Clara, taking in her pallor and the ill-fitting clothes she still wore from the brothel. "Of course, the missus will get her fixed up." Jackson's wife, Martha, proved to be a blessing. She provided Clara with proper clothing, hot baths, and nourishing meals without asking uncomfortable questions. For 3 days, Clara regained her strength while Ethan conferred with Jackson about Webb's whereabouts. On the fourth morning, Clara was hanging laundry when Ethan approached, expression grim. "We need to leave," he said without preamble. "Words reached Webb that you escaped. His men are searching every settlement within 50 miles. How would he know where to look?" "He doesn't," Ethan replied. "But he's offering a bounty for information, $500 for your return." "Why would he care so much about one woman?" "It's not about you," Ethan explained. "It's about what you might know. Webb thinks Thomas shared information with you about the Helena job." Clara packed quickly, fear lending speed to her movements. Martha provided supplies and a tearful embrace. Within the hour they were riding again, this time heading deeper into the mountains where Ethan believed they could lose themselves among the mining camps and remote valleys. As they climbed higher, snow still clung to north-facing slopes despite the spring sunshine. The air grew thinner, sharper in Clara's lungs. She found herself watching Ethan's broad shoulders ahead of her on the trail, drawing strength from his steady presence. Though still cautious, she had begun to trust him, if only because their survival had become intertwined. That night, camped in a sheltered grove of pines, Clara finally asked the question that had been growing in her mind. What happens when this is over? When Webb is dead? Ethan looked up from the fire, flames reflecting in his eyes. I told you, I'll take you wherever you want to go. And where would that be? Clara whispered. I have nothing left. For once, Ethan had no ready answer. They sat in silence as night settled fully around them, each contemplating futures neither had imagined before their paths had violently intersected. As days turned to weeks in the mountains, Clara and Ethan fell into an uneasy rhythm. Each morning they broke camp, covered their tracks, and continued their nomadic existence, always watching for signs of pursuit. The forced proximity gradually softened the barriers between them. During long rides through alpine meadows bright with wildflowers, Clara began to share memories of her life before Thomas. I was a school teacher in Illinois, she told Ethan one afternoon as they rested their horses beside a clear running stream. My parents died of fever when I was 19. I answered Thomas's advertisement for a wife 6 months later. He sent train fare and we married the day I arrived. You were brave to come west on just a letter, Ethan observed. Clara shrugged. I had few options. The school board preferred unmarried women who could devote themselves entirely to teaching. Once my parents were gone, staying meant poverty. You never regretted it? Never, Clara said firmly. Thomas was kind, patient. We built something good together. That night, Ethan finally shared his own story. He had joined the Texas Rangers at 20, married young, lost his wife in childbirth along with their infant son. Grief had made him reckless, earning him a reputation for taking assignments others avoided. Jenkins was the first partner who stuck, Ethan admitted. Made me remember there was more to life than hunting outlaws. His voice hardened. Then Webb killed him, shot him in the back while he was helping a wounded bank teller. Clara studied Ethan's face in the firelight. And when you catch Webb. What then? Haven't thought that far ahead. I think you have, Clara countered softly. I think revenge has been your only purpose for so long you're afraid of what comes after. Ethan's silence confirmed her observation. The weather turned the next day. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, bringing a late spring snowstorm that forced them to seek substantial shelter. They found a cave set into a hillside deep enough to protect them and the horses from the worst of the weather. For 3 days the storm raged. Confined together in the small space, they talked more than they had in all the weeks before. Clara learned of Ethan's childhood in Missouri, his complicated relationship with his father, the books he'd enjoyed as a boy. He listened as she described her dreams of someday having children, the garden she'd planned for summer, her collection of pressed wildflowers left behind when Webb attacked. On the third night, as wind howled outside their shelter, Ethan asked about her time at the Crimson Feather. No one had yet been brave enough to broach the subject, not even Martha during their stay at the settlement. Clara stiffened. There's nothing to tell, there's everything, Ethan said gently. What happened there is part of you now, whether you want it to be or not. His simple acknowledgement broke something inside her. Words poured out, the humiliation, the fear, the violation of body and spirit. She spoke until her voice grew hoarse, sparing no detail, daring him to flinch away from the ugliness. But Ethan didn't flinch. He listened, his face registering anger but never disgust or judgment. When she finally fell silent, emotionally spent, Ethan took her hand gently between his own. You survived, he said. Many wouldn't have. Surviving isn't living, Clara whispered. No, but it's where living begins again. The storm passed and they continued their journey, but something had shifted between them. A tentative trust had formed in that cave, fragile but real. Clara found herself watching Ethan when he wasn't looking, nodding the gentleness in hands capable of violence, the occasional smile that transformed his solemn face. They reached a mining town called Silver Creek 2 days later. Unlike Copper Creek's gaudy establishments, Silver Creek was a hardworking community of miners and merchants. They needed supplies and Ethan judged it remote enough to risk a visit. Stay close, he warned as they rode down the main street. Keep your hat low. The general store provided necessities, and Ethan made quiet inquiries about Webb's gang while Clara waited with the horses. When he emerged, his expression was satisfied. Webb's been seen near Helena. The bank job is still planned. They were nearly back to the trail when Clara noticed a man watching them from the doorway of the assay office. A chill ran through her as recognition dawned. One of Webb's men, the one who'd ransacked her bedroom. Ethan, she whispered urgently. We need to leave. Now. They mounted quickly, but it was too late. The man had vanished, presumably to alert others. They had barely reached the edge of town when shots rang out behind them. Four riders gave chase, gaining ground on the narrow trail. Ethan veered off into the dense forest, Clara following close behind. Their pursuers split up, attempting to flank them. A shot whistled past Clara's ear. Another struck a tree beside her. Then came a pained grunt from Ethan as his body jerked in the saddle. Ethan. "Keep riding," he ordered through gritted teeth, blood spreading across his shirt. They broke through the trees onto a rocky slope. An abandoned mine entrance appeared ahead, its timbers weathered but standing. Ethan headed straight for it, dismounting with difficulty at the entrance. Clara helped him inside as shots continued to pepper the hillside around them. The mine tunnel extended deep into the mountain, sections reinforced with timber supports. Ethan stumbled, leaning heavily against Clara. She guided him to a small chamber where mining equipment still lay scattered. He sank down against the wall, face alarmingly pale. "We need to keep moving," he insisted. "You need tending first," Clara countered, examining the wound. The bullet had entered his shoulder, missing vital organs but causing significant bleeding. She tore strips from her petticoat to create bandages and applied pressure to the wound. "They'll find the horses," Ethan warned. "Come looking." "Let them," Clara said with newfound determination. "This tunnel has multiple branches. I saw mining carts on side tracks. We'll lead them away from where we're hiding." Using knowledge gained from Thomas's occasional mining work, Clara set up false trails. She moved a cart down one tunnel, left a bloody handprint on a support beam in another, all while returning to check on Ethan. By nightfall, she had created a maze of misleading clues. Ethan's condition worsened as fever set in. Clara dampened her handkerchief with precious water from their canteen, cooling his forehead as he slipped in and out of consciousness. During lucid moments, he insisted she leave him, continue alone. During delirious ones, he called her by names she didn't recognize. "Jenkins, Sarah, Pa, I'm sorry," he murmured repeatedly. "Failed you all." "No," Clara soothed. "You haven't failed anyone." 2 days she tended him, rationing their meager supplies, venturing carefully to the mine entrance only once to collect rainwater. Webb's men searched the hillside but never discovered their hiding place deep within the mine. Gradually, Ethan's fever broke. His strength returned slowly, but the dangerous glaze left his eyes. On the third day, as Clara changed his bandage, Ethan caught her hand. "You saved my life," he said simply. "You saved mine first," she reminded him. "Not the same, you could have run." "Should have," Clara shook her head. "Where would I go?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Ethan's gaze held hers, searching for something. Whatever he found made him reach up with his good hand, fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected tenderness. Clara didn't pull away. After weeks of running, of fear and mistrust, the gesture anchored her. She leaned slightly into his touch, a silent permission. Ethan drew her closer, hesitating only a moment before pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning rather than demanding. Clara closed her eyes, surprised by the rush of warmth that flooded through her. When they parted, Ethan studied her face anxiously. "I shouldn't have." "No," Clara agreed. "But I'm glad you did." It was a beginning, fragile and uncertain. Neither spoke of it as they focused on practical matters of survival, but something fundamental had changed. What Clara had initially perceived as misfortune, being bound to this dangerous, wounded man, had somehow transformed into something she was no longer eager to escape. That night, as Ethan slept beside her in the darkness of the mine, Clara realized she had begun to imagine a future again. Not the one she had planned with Thomas, but something new, undefined, yet surprisingly hopeful. Outside, Webb and his men still hunted them. Justice or vengeance still waited. But for the first time since the day Thomas died, Clara felt something beyond mere survival stirring within her, the cautious return of life itself. A week after leaving the mine, Ethan had recovered enough to travel. They made their way cautiously toward Copper Creek, no longer fleeing but moving with purpose. Clara had been resistant when Ethan first suggested returning to the place of her captivity, but his reasoning was sound. "Webb thinks we're running," Ethan explained. "He won't expect us to double back. We need to end this, Clara. Otherwise, we'll be looking over our shoulders forever." Their plan was audacious in its simplicity. Thomas's gold pocket watch, which Webb had taken, was their bait. Ethan would spread rumors that Thomas had hidden Webb's stolen bank money, with the watch containing clues to its location. Clara would remain disguised and hidden while Ethan set the trap. Copper Creek looked much as Clara remembered, though the fire had claimed several buildings on the east side of town. The Crimson Feather still stood, its red facade somehow more garish in daylight. Clara fought back nausea as they passed it, her disguise of men's clothing and a wide-brimmed hat concealing her identity. They took rooms at a small boarding house run by a widow who asked no questions. Ethan spent days establishing their presence, spreading carefully crafted rumors in saloons while always appearing slightly drunk. Clara remained largely invisible, venturing out only when necessary and always careful to avoid Madame Rosalie's girls. The rumors are taking hold, Ethan reported one evening. Webb's man was in town today asking questions. They'll come for you, Clara said worriedly. It's too dangerous. Been dangerous since the day we met, Ethan reminded her. This ends soon one way or another. The confrontation began sooner than they expected. 2 days later, a messenger brought a note to Ethan's room. Clara opened it with trembling fingers while Ethan cleaned his guns. It's from Madame Rosalie, she said, voice tight. She wants to meet at the Crimson Feather tonight, says she has information about Webb. Ethan frowned. It's a trap. Obviously, Clara agreed. But what if she truly knows something? She and Webb have history. Too risky, Ethan insisted. We stick to the plan, Clara studied the note again. I should go instead. Absolutely not. Rosalie knows me. She won't be expecting me to walk through her front door voluntarily. Clara's voice strengthened with conviction. I need to face her, Ethan, for myself. They argued long into the afternoon, but Clara remained firm. Finally, Ethan relented, adding conditions. He would follow, position himself nearby, intervene at the first sign of trouble. Clara would wear a small Derringer pistol concealed in her sleeve. The meeting would happen in Rosalie's public parlor, not upstairs. That evening, Clara dressed carefully in a simple gown borrowed from their landlady. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair, but her resolve never wavered. This confrontation had become necessary for her healing, a reclaiming of power Rosalie had once stripped away. The Crimson Feather was quieter than usual when Clara entered. A piano player tinkled a mournful tune in the corner while a few early patrons nursed drinks. Madame Rosalie sat at her regular table, surprise flickering across her painted face when she recognized Clara. Well, she drawled, recovering quickly. The lost lamb returns. What miracle brought you back to my establishment? Clara sat across from her, back straight. I understand you have information about Sela's web. Rosalie laughed. You've developed nerve, girl, I'll give you that. She signaled for drinks. What's your interest in Webb besides the obvious? He took something valuable from my husband. I want it back. The watch? Rosalie raised a penciled eyebrow. That's what all this fuss is about, a timepiece. You know it's more than that. Rosalie studied her, calculation evident in her eyes. Webb believes it contains a cipher, a map to the money your husband stole from him. Thomas stole nothing, Clara countered. Webb invented that story to justify murdering him. Perhaps, Rosalie conceded. But Webb believes it enough to pay handsomely for your capture. He's arriving tomorrow to collect you personally. The news sent ice through Clara's veins, but she maintained her composure. Then we have nothing more to discuss. As she rose to leave, Rosalie grabbed her wrist. Foolish girl, the doors are already barred. Webb's men surround this building. Clara tried to pull free, reaching for her concealed weapon, but hands seized her from behind. A cloth pressed over her face, sweet-smelling chemicals overwhelming her senses. Her last conscious thought was of Ethan, hoping he had seen enough to understand the betrayal. She woke in familiar surroundings, the same upstairs room where she'd been held before. Her head pounded as she struggled to sit up. The door opened to reveal Sela's Webb himself, Thomas's gold watch dangling from his fingers. Mrs. Dawson, he greeted her. Apologies for the rough handling, necessary precautions. What do you want from me? Clara asked, though she already knew Webb held up the watch. Your husband was clever. The watch has a hidden compartment, but it's empty. Where's the cipher, Mrs. Dawson? There is no cipher, Clara insisted. Thomas wasn't a thief. Webb's expression hardened. Your husband infiltrated my organization, fed information to the marshals for months. 5 of my men hung because of him. He took something else too, documents that would implicate people far more dangerous than me. Clara's mind raced, trying to make sense of these revelations. What people? Judge Morrison, for one, Webb said casually. Territorial judge with ambitions for governorship. He's been ensuring certain cases never reach court, certain witnesses disappear. The name registered dimly in Clara's memory. Thomas had mentioned Judge Morrison once, his expression troubled. I don't know anything about documents, Clara maintained. Webb studied her face. I believe you, but your husband must have hidden them somewhere you would eventually find, something meaningful to you both. A commotion downstairs interrupted their conversation. Gunshots, breaking glass, shouting. Webb cursed, drawing his pistol. "Stay put," he ordered, locking the door behind him. Clara immediately searched the room for weapons, finding nothing. She moved to the window, relieved to find it unlocked. The sounds of fighting intensified below. As she prepared to climb out, the door burst open. Ethan stood there, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No, Webb's downstairs. I know." Ethan handed her a small revolver. "Stay behind me." They moved through the hallway past signs of struggle. Two of Webb's men lay motionless on the landing. Downstairs, the parlor had been destroyed in the fighting. Madame Rosalie cowered behind her bar, face ashen. Webb was nowhere to be seen. They stepped outside to find him mounting a horse, preparing to flee. Ethan raised his gun, but Clara placed her hand on his arm. "Wait, he knows about Judge Morrison, about documents Thomas had." Ethan hesitated, giving Webb time to disappear down the street. "Morrison, you're sure?" He said Thomas had proof of corruption, that the judge was protecting Webb's operation. Ethan's expression darkened. "Morrison signed the order dismissing charges against Webb last year, said there wasn't enough evidence." They pursued Webb to the edge of town, where he'd gathered the remnants of his gang. A shootout ensued, bullets splintering wood around them as they took cover behind an abandoned wagon. Ethan's shots found two of Webb's men, but he was outnumbered. Clara, staying low behind their cover, spotted Webb attempting to circle behind them. Acting on instinct, she raised her revolver and fired. The bullet struck Webb's shoulder, spinning him around. He fired back wildly as he fell, the shot going wide. Ethan seized the opportunity, advancing on the injured man while Clara provided covering fire against the remaining gang members. "It's over, Webb," Ethan declared, standing over him with his gun aimed at Webb's heart. Webb laughed through bloodied teeth. "Kill me and Morrison buries everything. You'll never touch him." "Where are the documents Thomas took?" Clara demanded, joining them. "Gone," Webb spat. "Like you'll be when Morrison finds out you know." The remaining gang members, seeing their leader captured, melted away into the gathering dusk. Ethan bound Webb's wound roughly, then secured his hands. "We need to leave," he told Clara. "Now, before Morrison hears about this." They traveled through the night, Webb secured on a spare horse. By morning, they reached a territorial marshal's outpost where Ethan had contacts. The marshal, a grizzled veteran named Holt, listened to their story with growing concern. "Morrison has friends in high places," Holt warned. "Without those documents, it's your word against his." "What if there were witnesses?" Clara suggested. "The girls at the Crimson Feather know about Webb's connection to Morrison, Madame Rosalie too. They'd never testify," Webb sneered. "Morrison would have them killed before they reached the courtroom." Clara met his gaze steadily. "They might if someone offered them protection, a new start somewhere else." The case against Judge Morrison became a sensation throughout the territory. Clara's testimony about Webb's confession, corroborated by three former brothel workers who found the courage to come forward, provided the foundation. Webb himself, facing the gallows, eventually traded information for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Clara sat in the courtroom each day, Ethan beside her, as Morrison's corruption was laid bare. The judge was convicted, but powerful friends vowed revenge from the shadows. Clara and Ethan knew their journey wasn't over. As long as Morrison's allies remained free, they would never be truly safe. 1 year later, spring returned to Montana territory. Clara stood on the porch of a modest ranch house, watching as Ethan worked with a young colt in the corral. The past year had brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. They had moved 3 times before settling here, far from Copper Creek, but close enough to the growing town of Millerville to maintain connections. The ranch had become known as a sanctuary of sorts. Currently, 2 women recovered in the guest cabin, one fleeing an abusive husband, another escaping circumstances similar to Clara's. Helping them heal had become Clara's purpose, while Ethan's reputation as a former Texas Ranger brought occasional work from the local sheriff. They had married in winter, a simple ceremony with Martha and Jackson as witnesses. The transition from protector and protected to husband and wife hadn't been seamless. Both carried wounds that sometimes reopened unexpectedly. But each day brought new healing, new understanding. Ethan finished with the colt and joined Clara on the porch, dust clinging to his clothes. She handed him water from the dipper, smiling as their fingers brushed. "Mrs. Halloway rode out to thank you," Ethan said. "Said her daughter's doing better at school." Clara nodded, satisfaction warming her. "Sarah just needed confidence and safety." You gave her both. As evening settled around them, Clara reached for Ethan's hand. Dance with me? He looked startled. Here now, here now. She positioned his hand at her waist, took his other in hers. It's simple, just follow my lead. They moved slowly across the porch, no music but the wind in the pines and distant bird song. Ethan stepped on her toes twice, apologized, then began to find the rhythm. Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Never thought I'd have this again, Ethan murmured against her hair. Home purpose, you, nor I, Clara admitted. After Thomas died after the Crimson Feather, I thought that part of me was dead forever. Ethan pulled back slightly to look at her. Regrets, Clara shook her head. What seemed like my worst nightmare became my salvation. Every step, even the painful ones, led here. As darkness fell completely, they continued their dance, two souls who had found in each other not just healing but hope, not just safety but strength. The night was theirs, and all the nights to come. Years later, a young woman arrived at their gate, clothes travel-worn, eyes haunted by experiences Clara recognized too well. She hesitated before the ranch house, clearly ready to flee at the first wrong word. Clara approached slowly, understanding in her eyes. You're safe here, she said simply, offering her hand. Come inside, rest. When you're ready, I'll tell you a story about how nightmares can sometimes become the beginning of something unexpected. The woman took her hand tentatively. As they walked toward the house where Ethan waited in the doorway, Clara felt the familiar circle completing itself once more. From victim to survivor to healer, a journey she continued to make with each new arrival, each shared story of redemption.